member whose mobile phone was proving a distraction to both the cast and audience. Yet only a year later, I sat in a screening of the disappointing movie version of The History Boys, at which an attendee had not one, but two phones in his hands, using the glaring light from one to illuminate the screen of the other so that he could carry on texting. You remember that scene in Woody Allen's The Purple Rose of Cairo, where a character reaches down from the screen and pulls an audience member into the film? If only Griffith's imposing screen presence had been similarly able to break through the fourth wall and stick said patrons' phones where the sun don't shine. But in the absence of such an intervention, the film simply played on, spoilt by the selfish actions of one audience member who had no sense of cinema as a living, breathing medium which requires as much respect from its patrons as theatre. And why should he? Because as far as the cinema staff were concerned, no one seemed to care how he behaved. Once upon a time, he would have been ejected from the auditorium. Now he was able to treat it as his own living room. Things do not have to be this way. I was particularly impressed by a recent trip to a massive multiplex just outside New Orleans where, for reasons which fail me now, I had to go to see the disappointing Farrelly Brothers comedy Hall Pass at an 11 o'clock screening on a Wednesday night. The screening was surprisingly well attended, with the ludicrous laxity of the American R rating, meaning that several parents had brought along children who were A, far too young to be up that late, and B, far too young to be watching a movie which contained, according to our very own British Board of Film Classification, strong language, sex references, and crude humour. The film sucked, but the screening was great, thanks largely to the presence of a rather imposing usher who seemed to have been recently released from a steroid farm and who looked ready to use lethal force to suppress any improper behaviour. No one would have dared to take out their mobile phone or make noise with their popcorn with this man mountain in the auditorium, and he promptly became my new best friend. Forget armed policemen, I want armed ushers. Coincidentally, someone else wrote into my BBC blog to say that they worked in a UK multiplex and the reason there were never any ushers around to police the screenings was because they were all too busy cleaning up all the spilled popcorn. Which brings us back to regular, medium or large. Apparently the attendant had decided to cut me out of the conversation entirely and go directly to point-of-sale contact with the 11 or 16-year-old with whom he hadn't yet fallen out. Large, she replied merrily. Small, I shrieked embarrassingly. We don't do small, only regular, medium, or... Right, regular. I want large. We settled on medium. You want a drink with that? No, we have our own water. Did you buy it in the foyer? No, I brought it from home. You can't take your own water into the cinema. Only drinks purchased in the foyer can be taken into the cinema. Then we don't want a drink. Yes, we do. I want Coke. Regular, medium, or regular? Diet or regular? I shouted again. This was getting out of hand. I was losing my grip. People around me were starting to look concerned and a tad irate. No wonder it was taking such a long time to sell tickets if people like me were holding up the line like this. Suddenly it was all becoming my fault. I had to get a grip and move on. Just regular, I whispered. Very, very regular, okay? Okie dokie, replied the attendant with a shrug, and he shuffled off to fill my bulging order of crap, leaving the ticket queue utterly unmanned, like a stationary line of traffic waiting at a red light signal that has suddenly decided to go for a stroll. We all waited. We all waited some more. We all waited some more. People behind me were starting to get antsy about missing the start of their programme in a manner which seemed indirectly to be pointing the finger of blame at me, in exactly the same way that I was indirectly pointing the finger of blame at the person standing in front of me before I became the person standing in front of me and felt my own finger of blame pointing at me from behind, if you see what I mean. After what seemed an eternity, my nemesis returned, a medium popcorn in one hand, regular Coke in the other, both spilling generously over the floor as he walked. He put them on the counter in front of me, tapped some numbers into the till, and then looked up and let me have it. £21.50. How much? £21.50. For 1.5 tickets, a small Coke and a medium popcorn? You've got to be kidding! He heaved a resigned sigh. Presumably he'd been here before. £14.60 for the ticket, £4.50 for the popcorn, £2.40 for the Coke. I was stunned, although honestly I had no reason to be. A couple of hours earlier I had discovered that ordering 1.5 premium seats online would have cost a staggering £17.80 plus a booking charge of 75p per ticket, pushing the total price up to £19.30. It was this WTF online revelation that had persuaded me to be a cheapskate and opt for standard seating after all. For some strange reason, £14.60 seemed like just a little bit more than a tenner, while £19.30 sounded like 70p change from a score. But now the additional purchase of a couple of moderately sized portions of crap, solid and liquid, had moved us into the ballpark of the handsomely attired pony, and I was rapidly turning into Arthur Daly. Where was Dennis Waterman when you needed him? The most likely answer was that he was round the back unloading huge cartons of unpopped corn, from which the cinema would ultimately make more profit than the films. As the Times pointed out in 2004, to cook up 145 grams of popcorn at home would cost you 4p for the vegetable oil, 19p for the popcorn, and 3p for the sugar. Chuck in 4p for the cost of the gas and the cardboard packaging, and the whole kit and caboodle comes to 30p. That's a profit markup of well over 1,000% when sold in the cinema foyer. No wonder the tickets themselves are becoming secondary. Cash or credit card? Asked the attendant with the merest hint of malice. What? Oh, credit card, I suppose. Hang on, just assure me that there isn't an extra charge for paying by card. He smiled, said nothing, took the credit card payment, handed me the tickets, and suddenly we were neither friends nor foe. Next! I walked away feeling like I'd been mugged, or violated, or defiled in some ill-defined yet essentially unspeakable manner. As I stumbled toward the screening area, which housed umpteen small but separate cinemas, I caught sight of a clock which told me that it was now 2:59. Damn! The programme had started 19 minutes ago. Maybe we had missed the beginning of the film after all. We better leg it. The trailers could all be done and dusted by now. Zach could be working his magic. No such luck. We burst into the screening room just in time to see the usually lovable Martin Freeman being a bit embarrassing in yet another of those bloody awful anti-piracy adverts. You know, the ones in which actors who should know better wander around unconvincing movie sets wearing painfully casual everyday clothes and thanking us poor schmucks for paying a small fortune in order to endure their self-congratulatory twaddle, thereby ensuring that we all enjoy the real experience, as long as we're not sitting in the standard economy seat of cinema as it's meant to be seen. I hate those adverts almost as much as I hate being frisked for recording devices before going into press screenings of movies which, it is implied, I am likely to record and then upload to the internet for my own extravagant profit and pleasure. For the record, if movie companies really wanted to stop people downloading illegal copies of their product, they would simply follow the example of the music industry and make that product available legally in the formats audiences want. Having spent years pursuing the creators of Napster through the courts, the music industry simply adopted the technology themselves, allowing them to generate revenue from music exchanged over the internet. CD sales may have taken a bashing, but money now pours in thanks to everything from online sales of albums to downloads of single tracks and royalties from sites like Spotify. Moreover, the production and distribution costs associated with online sales are a fraction of those incurred by pressing, packaging and shipping CDs. Look at the example of Radiohead. They made their album In Rainbows available online, where customers could pay whatever they liked to download it, and they still made a hefty profit in the process. If people want to go and buy a pre-packaged album in a real-life shop, and, despite the march of technology, millions still do, then they can. If, on the other hand, they want to cherry-pick their favourite tracks from the internet and create their own personal portable jukebox, they can do that too. And although the record companies moaned about how the internet was going to strangle the industry, in the same way they once complained that home taping is killing music, ha ha ha, it soon became apparent that the people who downloaded music ended up buying more product than people who didn't. Far from killing music, the legacy of piracy was to reinvigorate and redefine the manner in which music was distributed and consumed through legitimate channels. In the case of movies, the business paradigm is eerily comparable. Allow people to choose how they want to watch movies and then provide them with a service which makes them happy to pay. In an ideal world, movies would be issued day and date in theatrical, DVD, Blu-ray and downloadable or streamable formats. Customers who want the deluxe theatrical experience can pay to see the film projected onto a proper-sized screen in a public auditorium, while those who want to squint at it in bite-sized bits on their mobile phones can do just that. Everyone pays, everyone's happy, and voila, the pirates are promptly squeezed out of the marketplace. This is not rocket science, it is GCSE-level economics. Moreover, it means that those who actually want to watch a movie in the cinema are spared the annoyance of being surrounded by people who would rather be fiddling around with their mobile phones, and who would now have no need to trouble the theatrical auditorium. Several independent distribution companies in the UK have been experimenting with multi-format day-and-date releases for a couple of years now. On Boxing Day 2009, the low-budget British indie horror flick Mum and Dad premiered simultaneously in cinemas, on DVD, and on download and TV pay-per-view. In the autumn of 2010, viewers of Mathieu Amalric's On Tour, which got a very warm reception in Cannes, and Brian Welsh's award-winning Brit pick In Our Name were given the choice between watching the movie in their nearest available cinema or live streaming it on their computer. And in spring 2011, Ken Loach's controversial Cannes-premiered Iraq war drama Route Irish opened in the UK as a simultaneous multi-platform release. By all accounts, the revenues accrued by these films not only matched, but exceeded the profits predicted for more conventional forms of distribution, and, presumably, the pirates didn't get a look in because their services were not required. As always, the majors are bringing up the rear, with Warner's and Fox prompting scandalous "end of cinema as we know it" headlines in the UK in May 2011, with news of their proposed on-demand service which would make movies available for home viewing 2 months after their theatrical release. This has prompted a furious response from the multiplex chains, who claim it will damage their takings, as indeed it might. But denting the attendance figures of those faceless warehouses that currently serve up the blandest of movies in the worst possible circumstances at extortionate prices can only benefit the kind of movie houses run by people who actually care about their punters and who strive for excellence in feature presentation. Why pay £8.50 to be treated like cattle in a fast food multiplex that shows the film in the wrong ratio in a noisy auditorium when you can watch it at home on your TV for a £5? Alternatively, why watch a film on a postage stamp-sized screen on your mobile phone when you can see it in all its projected widescreen glory in a well-run cinema whose patrons respect those around them and whose management thinks that the film deserves to be projected as the director intended? And if you think that such a place doesn't exist, then you've clearly never been to the Phoenix in East Finchley. Anyway, back to the multiplex and the harsh realities of Screen 7, which, despite Zombie Boy's computer-based protestations to the contrary, was far from full and was handsomely supplied with available last seats on the left aisle. OK, so the auditorium was tiny, and the seating anywhere but the back 2 rows was way too close to the screen for anyone over the age of 12 who had grown used to reading the paper at arm's length. Seats F8 and 9, which, you will remember, I had somehow failed to book online, were indeed available, as was a large section of the premium seating, in which the very few other patrons had spread themselves out with glee. Had any of them paid extra for this enhanced vantage point? I certainly hope not, as I guided my daughter to a premium left-hand aisle seat with nary an usher in sight to stop me. For a brief moment, I felt a surging rush of victory. After all that nastiness in the foyer, I had actually beaten the bastards. I had paid for a crap, cramped and crucially trapped mid-row standard seat, and now found myself ostentatiously stretching my legs out into the aisle and sinking into the plush opulence of a premium aisle seat that would allow me to watch the movie without straining or craning or cramping my style. OK, so I had probably paid twice, what with all that online confusion and whatnot, and at some point in the not-too-distant future, I would get a Barclaycard bill telling me that I'd actually watched the movie from the vantage point of 4 different seats. A quadraphonic experience indeed. But sod it, for the moment I was where I wanted to be, in the cinema, in a good seat, and in good time to see the entire movie from beginning to end.